Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Odyssey House Journals. I'm Randall Carlisle. My guest is Steve Slater, and this is a first for me. I've got in my 40 years of broadcasting on TV, I never had the hiccups when I went on the air, and I've had the hiccups for 2 days. So if you hear some weird noises in the background, that's me hiccuping. And I don't know how to cure. Do you have a cure for that?
Not really good. Holding your breath, maybe?
Well, I'll hold my breath for the whole podcast.
Right.
I can. And when I'm dead, my hiccups will be cured. This is one of the most watched and listened to podcasts dealing with addiction and recovery. And our goal is not to push Odyssey House, which I would call sort of a mainstream treatment agency. Our goal is to explore all avenues that can lead to recovery, because recovery is different for each person. It's an individual thing. And Steve, you are with a group called Dharma Recovery.
Recovery Dharma.
Or Recovery Dharma.
It's a common, we get that a lot, it's Recovery Dharma.
So what is it?
Yeah, so Recovery Dharma is a group that's been around for just over 4 years now, so a relatively new group, but it did come out of an older group called Refuge Recovery, and so both of these are similar approaches to recovery in that they're based on Buddhist teachings, but you don't have to be Buddhist to attend the groups. There's no dogma or religious aspect that you need to commit to be a part of it, but we use basically the meditation and mindfulness practices that come out of Buddhism as a means to help with recovery and addiction and the cravings that arise as part of addiction. And so,
for example, what do you? Okay, I come in and I'm a heroin or a meth addict. Mm-hmm. What do you actually? Because, and I should say that you hold weekly meetings at USARA, right?
We have meetings at USARA at noon on Wednesday, Friday, and Sundays.
And anybody can come.
Anyone can come, and if you're not able to come in person, we also have a Zoom link that you can join remotely those meetings. And so,
can you come high?
No, we ask for sobriety in our meetings. That's the one. We do have, if you're familiar with an AA tradition, just to give you a sense of our meeting format, when we come in, we have some basic readings, and one of those is our practice, and it goes through, a commitment to sobriety in our meetings and respect for one another and just kind of the basic approach of the meetings. And then we read the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path, which is basically just a summary of these teachings about committing to things like using wise speech and so on, and then we do a guided meditation. So I facilitate today, for example, on Wednesdays at noon. We'll pick a meditation that I'll read the instruction for everyone who's there to participate in. So one might just be focusing on the breath and trying to get out of your thinking and all of your negative thoughts, and so
right.
Just focusing on the breath. And we also do meditations that are called heart practices. So there's one that's like compassion, and so the typical path will be you'll focus on yourself, and I'll provide a few phrases for the person to recite to themselves. Being compassionate to themselves, forgiving themselves for the things that they've done in the past.
As we know, all addicts are suffering from shame and guilt and things like that.
Right, and then you'll move the practice next to someone who's been a benefactor or a teacher, someone that you have fond feelings towards, and you'll send those same thoughts to that person, and then we move to a neutral person, and then to maybe someone who's difficult in their life in the meditation. And so the goal in these meditations isn't to produce some type of magic by sending these thoughts to someone. It's to change your own internal relationship with your feelings towards yourself, towards people outside of yourself, and try to open up and process some of the negativity and move past that.
Which is critically important.
Right.
Does it work?
Yeah, we have many people who come in who've never meditated before, and they say that was just amazing. At first when you said think of somebody difficult, I resisted. I didn't want to do it, but then as it went on, I found myself realizing, that I was hurting myself by holding these feelings for this person.
Sure.
And I started to soften around that. So, and we have people who've meditated for quite some time, and also feel the benefits of it. And one thing I'll say about it is starting with that approach of meditation, and then we move into our sharing portion after the meditation is, and this isn't to take away from other traditions, but we've had people come from other recovery backgrounds and say it's so calming to start with a meditation where it feels very intimate and there's a little bit of vulnerability, and then we move into the sharing portion where everybody feels a little bit more relaxed, a little calmer, and just that opening up that happens for people after doing that meditation. So that's the next part of the meeting. Then is a sharing period where we will sometimes read out of the book just a brief couple paragraphs, and then we'll have open sharing where people are welcome to share or not, depending on their comfort about what maybe came up for them in the meditation or the reading, and that's a basic meeting.
I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I've been clean for 11 years. And I remember the outpatient program I went to, they tried to lead us in meditation, and I found it very difficult to, and people in our program and everywhere talk about how difficult it is to get your brain to forget about all the outside crap going on in the world,
right,
and just focus on the meditation.
Right.
It is difficult.
Yeah, it can be difficult, and we like to start. So we have a script for our meetings. If that's one of the things I really like about Recovery Dharma too, is that anyone can start a meeting, and we have materials in the back of the book and a script that someone can follow to do the meditations. They don't have to be a licensed meditation practitioner or anything like that. They can just use the meditations in the back of the book. But before we start our meditations, we always try to orient everyone into a mindset of being compassionate towards themselves, because we talk about that. While we're meditating, there's going to be distractions. We do it at USARA. I mean, there's people still working in the office, microwaving their lunch.
Sure,
there's cars going by. And so we talk about that, like, that's okay. You're going to have thoughts. You might get sleepy. You might get irritated by the person's breathing next to you. Just all that's okay. Like, don't be hard on yourself if you're struggling or being distracted. The whole goal of this meditation is to be compassionate to yourself. And we actually have those reminders built into our meditation scripts. So we'll have a place, say 5 minutes in, that it reminds you that if you're finding it difficult or distracted, just come back to your breathing. And the whole point of the meditation practice that we're teaching in Recovery Dharma is to be able to recognize when you're struggling and when you're being critical on yourself, and finding tools to be able to ground yourself, because that's what's really key to deal with adversity in general, whether it's a strong craving or trigger that comes up, to drink or use or whatever. Having tools that you've practiced over and over again that allow you to be able to find something like the breath or tuning into your body that you can recenter on and deal with these arising feelings and so on. It's kind of what we're teaching. And so from our perspective, the way we teach meditation in Recovery Dharma is every time you think you're having a horrible meditation but you realize that you're off here or over there, that's success. You're finding mindfulness by just recognizing what's going on inside. And so that's again, the whole point of the mindfulness practice is to become more aware of what's going on internally for yourself, so that you're not just dragged around by your thoughts or an external trigger. You have some control or some agency through these practices over and over again.
So if I went to your, what do you call it, a class or
we just have our meetings, our weekly meetings. Yep.
Okay. If I went to your meeting and I'm, as we all know, most people in addiction focus on an outward triggering mechanism. My girlfriend dumped me, my wife is screwing around, my parents died, that kind of stuff. So is there a mindfulness technique that I would pick up going to this meeting that would help me deal with that particular instance?
Yeah, and again, I think our practices there's 4 what we call heart practices, and so they all take different approaches. One of them is a forgiveness practice, and so that one I think is really powerful, where again, you all these meditation practices start with, in the order can be reversed in different traditions, but within the way they are structured in the Recovery Dharma script, you start with yourself first. Some people find that easier. Some people find that more difficult to send forgiveness to themselves. But then to someone that they're close to, someone who's neutral, someone who's difficult in their life. And so again, these practices aren't like instantaneous fixes. And for my own personal, I've been, doing meditation practice for over 5 years now. For my own self, I find, there are really challenging situations in my life that I continue to work on, and those things soften. They don't necessarily go away, but if there are certain things that are triggering or have been difficult and challenging for me, the more I do these practices, the more I can move away from being a victim or reacting to external circumstances and focusing more on like how am I, what is going on internally for me when these things come up. And we have lots of people come to the meetings that basically verify that that's what happens for them. We do have a lot of people come who are very, caught in their own circumstances at the moment, and blaming of everything. And I've been there myself in my own recovery of these are the things that happened in my life, and this is where I ended up. And so there can be a lot of anger. And so we try to focus on pretty basic practices. There are definitely more in-depth meditation practices and more challenging meditation practices that we don't bring into our meetings. There's one that's called Tonglen. That's an old Buddhist practice where you basically bring in the pain of others and then send out care and concern and replace. You're basically being willing to take on, suffering of others. But that's usually early in recovery. That's not something people are prepared for. We focus more on softening your own reactions to people. So I think, I don't know if that answers your question, but there are...
Yeah, no, it does, because you're learning how to deal with your own inner turmoil in a way different than using, which most people in addiction consider when they face a situation like that. What kind of response do you get from these meetings?
As far as just the feedback from the people who come to the meeting? Yeah, I think for me, the most... rewarding thing is when we do have new people. I think with any type of recovery meeting, there's a lot of fear and worry about what it's going to be like. And so I have quite a few people email me, I want to come, what is it like? And kind of like what we opened with, what is the meeting going to be like? Is there a lot of people?
Do I have kind of voodoo thing that we're doing?
Right. Do I have to speak? Do I have to know this background? Like, no, it's very welcoming and opening. You don't have to be a Buddhist. We have people from all different religious backgrounds who come.
Are you Buddhist?
I am now at this point now. I wasn't in the beginning of this, but I think so maybe there is that there's that concern. You might become a Buddhist with time, but
and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you
I personally don't feel there's people over the spectrum on this. I don't really consider Buddhism a religion. The way I practice it, it's more of a philosophy and approach to life, and it's a training of how you interact with the world based on some very time-tested practices. I'm not believing.
Yeah, time-tested. How long ago?
Right. 2,600 years ago. So, but yeah, as far as so after people have some concern about coming and we get them to come in the door. Often people like the great thing about having the Zoom. Often people feel most comfortable just joining that way first. They can even keep their video off, and they can put whatever name in they want, and so they can experience the meeting that way, and that's very low stress. And we always say that no one has to share. You can just tell us you're passing today. And so I think once people come in and then they give it a try, we have very positive reactions that people just say it was so calming and that they got a lot out of the meditation. People are often surprised how much they get out of the meditation. And I often hear what you were saying, people telling me, I've tried meditating before, I can't do it. My mind's all over the place, or this is happening, or I just get up and walk away frustrated. And so I think guided meditation is really a great entry because you don't have to worry too much. I'm gonna give you a few instructions every 30 seconds or a minute, so there's not that long of a period to just be stuck with your own thoughts.
I'm not doing it right. That kind of thing.
Yeah, and so people really find it to be very safe and welcoming. And the other common reaction we get is, and again, not to take away from other traditions, we have a number of people who come from very strong religious backgrounds where that was part of their trauma and part of their background and their history and part of what led them into addiction. And so they are absolutely not comfortable with going to some of these traditions that require them to surrender to a higher power and other things. And so this is, for them, when they find out about this, they're like, oh, I'm so grateful there's an alternative where it's more focused on, me taking control and working on, how I relate to what's happening outside, and working on myself and my own mind and my own reactions. And so people are very happy that there's this alternative as well.
So a so-called God or higher power does not enter into this?
No, it doesn't. And we have people who come from, the AA tradition,
right,
and that is their approach, and they still find, this approach is, again, we don't judge other people's beliefs, but there's not a higher power. It's about, again, taking responsibility for how you react to the circumstances that arise.
Do you have any? It's really hard to tell. Like people ask, is our program successful?
Right.
Do you have any numbers or quantification of how many people this has worked for? It's a really hard thing to.
Right. It is really challenging. I've been involved for, like I said, for 5 years with refuge recovery, which is very similar. And then we, when there was kind of a branching out into this new group, Recovery Dharma, in 2019, that's the approach that we've been taking. So I've been involved for over 5.5 years now, and I do see a lot of regular people who come. So I consider that's a measure of success,
sure,
myself included. I count myself among those people who've have 5.5 years of sobriety based on this technique, and had tried many other ways of finding sobriety before this. And then the other people who are regularly coming to the meeting. I also consider an aspect of our success that people will stumble and come back to our meetings very quickly, because there isn't this judgment, and we don't have this counting, and we don't have this,
Oh, you screwed up. You relapsed last week or something.
Right. Yeah. We Buddhism focuses on the now and the present, and we're here in this moment, and this is the only moment we can live in. Not that you get, if you've done something in the past, that you don't have to make amends for those things, or make, ask for forgiveness if you've done something that's harmed others, but not to, we don't, our practice really emphasizes not beating yourself up and shaming yourself, because there's so much of that. I remember when I first got into the practice, my first few meditations, I would actually be physically sweating and uncomfortable, because just sitting quietly and having shame and memories and things that I'd done while I was using come up and bubble
right,
up and trouble me. And so I think the practices are really well suited to help people unpack that and move past that and be kind to themselves. So we have I think we have a lot of success in that. We have people that I see come back that, they do have difficulties, and they stumble, but they don't feel that they can't come back to the meeting. They can come back to the meeting and say, I screwed up this weekend, and everybody's nobody's
sure,
shaking their head, or everybody's just like, it's okay, and is happy that they're back. And so
I've been to a whole bunch of AA meetings, and it sounds to me like the big difference is, first of all, the higher power concept, but then secondly, AA focuses a lot on, like in the fourth step, about going through all the screw-ups you had in your life, mm-hmm, which it sounds to me like you guys don't focus on, because you're focusing on now, mm-hmm, and then making amends to all the people that you may have hurt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we do have something called inquiries, so they're questions that you are supposed to reflect on, either with another friend who's in recovery, a peer that you can trust. And so I think we do have reflection on those things, but again, not to beat yourself up with shame
right,
about it.
You just screwed up over all these years.
Right. It's more, I think from my perspective and my own understanding of my own practice is occasionally reflecting on, if there is a temptation, or if it's been long enough where I start to think, oh, maybe things are different now, I can do this. That's when it's beneficial sometimes to reflect on past
sure, experience
of like, well, I know in the past I did this and this was the outcome, so why would I expect a different outcome now?
Sure.
So using your past as a more as experience to not have to repeat the same mistakes rather than holding those things over you. And I think the other difference that maybe is I've heard from others that's fairly striking is some of our experience in the Buddhist community that founded Recovery Dharma has resulted in it being very non-hierarchical. It's considered a peer-led group, and so I'm in recovery and I'm leading the meeting. Anyone can facilitate a meeting. We have all the documents here. We don't have like a formal structure of like, there's state chapters and there's local chapters. Every one of our meetings is completely independent, and we are the Recovery Dharma Salt Lake group. We're not beholden to Recovery Dharma Global. There is a board and a nonprofit, but their role is really to support things like creating the book. They have an annual conference. They help with the meditations. They help with the needs of the group. They support the local groups, and then we, as a part of that, we don't generally have a mentor-mentee structure. We have peers. We have what we sometimes call wise friends. You reach out to others in your group, but we try to avoid some of those power dynamics that can occasionally to lead to problems in groups.
You say you're in recovery from what?
From alcohol, and
Join the crowd.
Right. It's a large group, but yes. So I've been sober for about 5.5 years.
Okay, I've got 11. I've got you beat.
Right. Awesome.
That it sounds like I've never had a problem with when people talk about Buddhist philosophy and everything. Mm-hmm. I don't see how you can be negative about it because it makes sense, right?
Right. Yeah, I don't think
it's not controversial.
Right. I don't think we've ever had anyone show up that's found it to be a negative thing. I think occasionally there are people who've been raised in strong Christian traditions that find it a little bit threatening, perhaps because mostly they don't understand. I mean, mostly when people ask me questions now about it, whether it's in recovery or just in the world at large, because people know that this is a thing that I do. I don't keep it secret that I meditate and I facilitate Recovery Dharma meetings, and this is something important to me.
So do you meditate every day?
I do meditate daily in the morning.
For how long?
25-ish minutes in the morning, 25 to 30 minutes, depending on how quickly I have to move my kids along.
Did you meditate before you came in for the podcast?
I did, yes.
Huh.
So, to me, it's become, regardless of recovery, it's become one of the most essential tools in my life. It's something that I wish I had learned about, as a teenager. This was something that was known.
Can you imagine trying to tell a teenager, hey, okay, we're going to have family meditation now?
I've tried. I have a teenager. It hasn't gone over super well just yet. But he is interested in mindfulness because it's becoming more and more common in mainstream world and secular world. And so he's my oldest son is into sports, and he hears other athletes talking about the benefits of mindfulness and training their minds so that, say before a game, they're not just racked with anxiety. There's a way that you can step out of that and stop letting these circular thoughts going round and round in your head and just like letting that control you and ruin your performance. And so it has benefits for everyone.
So do you, does it cost something to go to this group?
No, it's completely free to show up at our meetings. If you're interested in a book, those are like $6. We have those usually at the meetings, but you can also get it as a completely free PDF.
And you're at USARA.
We're at USARA.
What were the hours again?
So we meet every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday at noon. So that's easy to remember. And those are, the Wednesday and Fridays are just an hour. Sundays a little bit longer because we do a bit more reading out of the book. So that's an hour and a half.
And USARA, for people listening or watching, is on 21st South, about how far east?
It's 200 east.
Yeah, just up from State Street.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there are a couple other meetings I'll just mention too, just because if someone is interested in a meeting or listening from somewhere else, there are Recovery Dharma meetings across the globe, mostly in the U.S., but many of them have Zoom because a lot of this we started right before the pandemic.
Sure.
So if you're looking for a meeting, there's online meetings every day of the week.
So what do you Google?
recoverydharma.org. So it's just recoverydharma.org, and then they have a meetings listings page.
Because we have viewers and listeners all around the world, actually, but a lot in the United States. Our second largest city is Columbus, Ohio. I presume they have a chapter there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep, definitely. So you can find your local meetings there, as well as hybrid meetings. There are a lot of people during COVID got into. There's a whole Recovery Dharma Online, or RDO now. That's just a community of people who have built what we call a sangha. So that means just community. They built an online community, and that's thriving and really large.
Well, in my opinion, it's obviously not going to hurt you.
Right.
So if you are struggling with addiction, maybe you want to give it a try. I mean, I still have trouble meditating, but it did help me a lot. So, and I appreciate what you do, and it's just another way to explore recovery.
Yeah, and it's just for myself personally, it's a practice that's helped me immensely, and I think for all of us, hopefully you find a mix of things that work for you. If you Recovery Dharma meeting helps you and supports your AA meetings, or a different practice you have, it's not the only thing I do either. I have intention setting and journaling and other things that I've done as well with this. But hopefully people can give it a try and find it beneficial.
Thank you for being my guest today, Steve Slater with Recovery Dharma, right?
Correct.
Got that right. All right. Thank you for watching another edition of Odyssey House Journals.